Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. So before the gathering, someone came up to me, and she's a community member who had a lung transplant several years ago. And she talked about how people, when they heard about the year she spent before the transplant, being concerned that every breath might be her last, that her lungs would give out before the organs came to help with the transplant, that they'd just express sympathy, fear, concern. And she said, actually, that was the best time of my life. That year when I didn't know if I'd have another breath, another hour, another day. Because every moment was sweet and crisp. And the hard part was when I had the transplant and afterwards, and things all came flooding back, the same old stories. Additionally, when she got the transplant, she started having a deep love of chocolate ice cream, which she later found out was the favorite food of her organ donor. So it's another little thing, Dory. So whenever she has chocolate ice cream now, she says, "This one's for you." But Ajahn Chah said that without a knowledge of death, life is very confusing. And we have these recollections in Buddhism of death, of the two main sannyas, perceptions the Buddha taught. The two most prominent ones were anicca sanya, perception of impermanence, inconstancy, and maraṇasati, perception of death. I know I've quoted this before, but Longpa Punadamo saying, everyone's so unfair to us Buddhists. They say, all you Buddhists talk about is suffering. And he says, no, we also talk about sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, and death. And yet, when you begin to encounter a perception of death, when you start to recollect it, you realize how unbalanced, asymmetrical our life is in the West, how imbalanced our culture is around this. It's like you've been listening to treble your whole life, and suddenly you hear bass, and you're like, that's what was missing. There's a depth to it. And it makes every moment pristine, because the way that we winnow the chaff from the grain of our lives, what is significant and worthy, is through a recollection of death. We only have this long. And the Buddha, in a sutta many of you will know, asked the monastics, how are you heedful of death? And one well-intentioned monk spoke up and said, I think how lucky I am to have these 7 days to practice the Buddha's teachings. I only have this long. And the Buddha said, you are heedless, monk. And then he could be quite fierce. And then the next monk in line says, I think, okay, I have this long, this day to recollect, to practice the Buddha's teachings. How lucky I am. The Buddha said, you are heedless. So the monks they're getting the picture now, but they're still quite brave. They're speaking up. And finally, one monk says, I think how lucky I am to have this breath, this inhale, to practice the Buddha's teachings. It would be a great gain for me if I had this long. And how lucky I am to have this long, the length of one exhale, to practice the Buddha's teachings. It would be a great gain for me. Or the time it takes to swallow one morsel of food. It's about 3 seconds. And the Buddha says, you are heedful. You practice heedfulness of death. And what people miss there is it's not just a sobering recollection, it's paired intimately with gratitude. How lucky we are to have this long to cultivate the path, to purify the heart. How extraordinary to have this long. And the Buddha says in the Dhammapada, those who are not mindful of death, the heedless are as if dead already. The heedful never die. And you think of this, the term sankhara in Buddhism, these patterns we run, programs of personality, of habit pattern. And we all know the people in our lives who've, over the years of running from suffering, of lack of awareness, are almost a clockwork amalgamation of patterning. There's almost no spark of life you can see below the surface of those patterns. It's there, it can be drawn out. But the patterns can take over our lives more and more. And that's heedlessness, whereas heedfulness, this bringing of mindfulness of the quality of knowledge and presence of path, this is heedfulness. This means we are truly alive. It is the one way we can be alive. And so Benjamin Franklin said, many people die at 25 and are buried at 75. How long have we all been walking ghosts? How much of our lives have we missed? Come back home. And if the mind wanders, recollection of death is the sword of wisdom which draws you back. My teacher, Ajahn Nisabho, when he couldn't follow the breath for a long time. And so Ajahn Chah, his main meditation object he gave Ajahn Nisabho for years was mindfulness of death. And just this recollection of a phrase can work, I will die. This is all I have. Life is uncertain. Death is certain. But watch as that just cuts everything and brings you right back here, right now. I have this long. And it's a very powerful meditative tool. How much can you keep yourself right in this moment? There's nothing else. The future is just proliferation. The past is past. This is all we have. And it's hard to remain angry at your partner for not washing the dishes if you know you both might die in the next breath. Forgiveness is wound into this too. And it also helps clarify your trajectory. When people would come to the monastery not knowing if they should ordain, Ajahn Nisabho's advice to them would be just recollect death every day. How long do you have? Life is hard. Human life is hard. We expect so much from it, but human life is not that great. It's just not. You know, your kids do stuff you don't want. The marriage isn't as great as you thought it would be. Democracy falters. Conditions shift. Samsara is broken. And every now and again, you'll get that glimpse of the crack that runs through the veneer of samsara where you realize, oh, it's really broken. It's not a little broken. It's really broken. But part and parcel of that is, yes, while on the surface, the conditioned realm, if you expect from life fulfillment, if you expect from the conditioned realm happiness, you will be disappointed. But the fact that this life is also, if used as a path towards awakening, an amazing opportunity, then life is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. It's utterly blessed if we use it to walk this path. And that's what recollection of death does, is it makes you realize none of the argument doesn't matter, the grudge doesn't matter, things will fail and falter and shift and fall. But this path, that's what you take with you, your provisions for the journey into the future. And if you don't believe in rebirth, it's fine. But what you may understand is because we are these patterns, because we take in patterning and give it back into the world, what ripples are you sending back into the world with you? How much can you transmute pain and defilement and bring back and bring forth just love? And the world needs love so badly. And that is a life well lived. So in the Visuddhimagga, a text called The Path of Purification, the Buddha talks about 8 ways of recollecting death. He says, 1, you can recollect it as an executioner following behind you, just right behind you all the time. And how careful, like, you can feel your posture just straighten up right then, like, oh God, all right, I guess I better sit up straight. You know, if you really thought of this executioner right behind you, how careful would you be with every act? How much would you make every movement an act of beauty and art? How careful would you be with your speech? And how much would you consider every interaction you had with someone as maybe your last? You know, like, we're always saying farewell in the words of Rilke, you know, the Duino elegies. Who said us like this? So we're always saying goodbye. But what would it mean if you really held this? This is my chance to be with this person. Who knows, maybe for the last time. How can I be with them in the most loving way I can? How can I ask for forgiveness? And if you have those splinters in your life remaining where you know, if I was at this person's deathbed, really, what has been left unsaid? What needs to be repaired? This is what recollection of death does as well. It's our path to healing. The next way the Buddha talked about recollecting death is by it's the ruin of success. So all the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations of career and circumstance and love, arguments, all these will fade. And that's not to say there's a hopelessness there. It's rather to say we don't have to tie our hearts to a conditioned realm which, you know, Ajahn Jeff says expectations are pre-planned resentments. And if we come to the world, the conditioned realm, expecting things to always get better, it's impossible. Pleasure, pain, gain, loss, fame, disrepute, praise, blame. The 8 worldly winds will blow us this way and that. We stand steady when we align ourselves with Dhamma and move with that. We can't live life on one continual inhale. Sankharas rise and they fall. Patterns rise and they fall. Careers, marriages, relationships, they rise and they fall. But what quality of heart can we cultivate that bleeds through the cracks through that all? When does Plato's prisoner see the shadows playing on the cave as just shadows? You don't have to tie your heart to them. You play with them playfully. You work as skillfully as you can, but you know this life is profound insofar as it is a path to awakening and purity of heart. And that is the greatest gift you can give the world. And you're in a long lineage of people like this. The Buddha said there's 4 noble lineages, or 4 aspects of noble lineage. One is content with any sort of clothing, food, and dwelling, the requisites. The material requisites of the world we are content with. And one delights in cultivating wholesome states. So those first 3 are about, as soon as you step into practice, you're stepping into a lineage millennia old of quiet monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen who have lived through the rise and fall of empires. And in each of those cases, the worldly conditions, are they good enough to practice with? Just enough. The first thing we have to do when we ordain is agree to the fact that all we can expect for a dwelling is the roots of a tree. All we can expect for food are the scraps of rice. All we can expect for clothing are the scraps of cloth that are discarded. That's it. And medicine is fermented cow's urine, so that's a real ask. Apparently that was a thing. Can we be content with the world conditioned realm as it is, but discontent or delighting in cultivating the heart? In the midst of all that, we acknowledge the shadow play on Plato's wall as just that, and yet we turn our eyes to the sunlight that begins to bleed through the cracks. And that's where life is extraordinary. That's the most profound lineage to step into. And there's a bunch of other of those recollections, but the 8th, and I love this, is the Buddha says, or in the Visuddhimagga it says, one recollects death as the fact that the life of a being lasts only for one instant, just as the wheel of a cart rests only at a single point on the ground. Even so, as our lives roll on, only one moment exists, and one recollects this being did not exist previously and does not exist in the future. Only now does this being exist, right now. This is all you have. It's all you've ever had, and it will. The present is all you ever will have, right now. And what a profound understanding of this pregnancy of the moment, how the immanent and divine begin to bleed through when you really recollect this is what we have with each other. How lucky we are to have this long to cultivate love and the heart in a world that needs it desperately. I love that image of the wheel of the cart resting on one small point, even so, just this long. And this, perhaps, when those near us die, is the greatest gift we can give, is by understanding their deaths as a reminder for cultivating the goodness in our own heart in their honor. And the Buddha says this, he says, there's 4 kinds of people. There's one who, like a fine thoroughbred at the sight of a whip, would begin to run. Even so, a practitioner, upon hearing of another's aging or sickness or death, goes forth into the holy life, begins to practice for the sake of this audience. Or there's a thoroughbred who, when the goad touches the whip, touches their fur, they begin to run. Even so, as a practitioner who, seeing someone sick or passing away, understands the frailty of life and goes forth. There's a thoroughbred who, at the touch of a whip to their skin, begins to run. Even so, a practitioner who has a relative fall sick or pass away begins to go forth into the holy life. Or there's a thoroughbred who, when the goad or the whip bites down to the bone, begins to run. And that's when one falls sick oneself and and recovering goes forth. So, for the sake of all of our practices, considering going forth, when the Buddha speaks about this, he speaks about moving into a state of freedom and homelessness. And for the sake of all those listening, it doesn't have to be ordaining as a monastic. We ordain in our hearts as well. And the sense of, can you stop trying to make a home out of a shifting, conditioned realm and find that this conditioned realm is a path, and that's how we can stay balanced in it and move through it, and to not have to wait until we get ill. It's enough to know that this exists, to hear about it, to see the whip. And can that be enough to make us move? And can we honor those who have passed near us by using it as a spur towards awakening ourselves? And there's a very practical way, or a very real way the Buddha talked about honoring the dead. And this is such a lack in our culture. We forget our dead. We forget our dead. The Western American milieu is one of the few cultures I know who so thoroughly forget our dead. Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, in the Latin American countries, ancestor worship in those days in China. Almost every culture I know of has some way of remembering their dead, and we forget. And this is a huge loss for us. Last weekend, September 7th, aligned with the Thai full moon day, when all the Thais come to the monastery, or many of them, and give offerings in honor of those who have passed away. And whenever you see Thai people receive alms, often you'll see they're bowing or they're pouring water into a little bowl. And that's a symbol of giving merit to the dead. Every morning in Thailand, as you go on alms round and people drop pieces of rice into your bowl and you give a blessing, you'll see them pouring this water, remembering their dead every day. Because in the suttas, or it's a later discourse, but it says, even as water from the rivers quickly fills up the sea, so this gift flows to the departed. And that's what the water represents, is it's giving merit. And in the Buddhist framework, the idea is that when someone dies, they don't, if you believe in rebirth, they don't pass on automatically to another rebirth often. They'll be stuck in a state we call a preta state, which is a spirit which has not yet found its way to some other state of being. It's bound to this realm. And the Buddha said that such states are near enough to the human that when someone who loves that person, who's been connected to them, remembers them, that a preta can feel it and receive the goodness. And that when someone dies, you should recollect them and do good and dedicate it to them. And it's not some esoteric economy of merit. It's inviting, just as if someone close to you said, look, I did this beautiful thing, I volunteered, I gave this gift, and I thought of you the whole time. I did that in your name. You would feel a glow. That's all this is. It's inviting another to identify and rejoice in goodness done. And the Buddha said that could have effect on beings close to the human realm. And the Buddha said, when you do good, you should always recollect your relatives that are in this realm. And one Brahmin said, what if we have no relatives nearby in such a realm? And the Buddha said, it is not possible. You've been through so many wanderings of samsara. You always have relatives nearby. And in the Buddhist conception, this is the doorway to compassion. Each of us have been each other's mothers, sisters, brothers, sons, everything to one another. How much can we care for our family that is near to us now? And look at each other in those eyes. And the thing is, many people won't, a lot of people, this will sound very fairy tale-ish, and that's just fine. I think what's important to note is that when we recollect the dead regularly, when we learn how to mourn and honor them, it changes our relationship to their memory too. If you're recollecting someone who's passed, your father, your mother, someone deep and close to you, you're changing your memory of them to something of light. You're recollecting the dead, and you're balancing out an asymmetry in your life. We have all these, on Google contacts, you have sort of the person's birthday. I'm glad they don't have a death day, but our Google calendars should have death days in them. Mark the death days of those who you love and remember them. This is something we've forgotten, and it's an imbalance in our hearts. So Ajahn Kobil and I just put together a Clear Mountain grieving ritual. I'll post it online. But basically, it's modeled after the Thai version. And what one does is you light a candle for the person as soon as they pass away and create a little shrine for them. And every day for 7 days, light that candle in the morning and evening, spreading loving kindness to the person who's passed. Remember them. Do one act of goodness every day in their name. Talk about them with someone you love. Wear black for that whole week if you can. And in the case of a parent, consider wearing black for a year in grieving. That's very common practice in Thailand. And it sounds extreme, but does it really? For a parent who's given you so much, is it really too much to wear black for a year? What a beautiful act to honor the dead, to not forget our dead. And at the end of those 7 days, to gather with friends, to celebrate the person, remember them, chant together, plant a tree in their name. You can mix in a bit of their ashes with the dirt that you plant in the tree. And from dusk till dawn, to keep noble silence for those 7 days. And to repeat that ritual after 50 days and 100 days and a year. And then every year on the anniversary of someone you deeply care about. Do you feel how right that feels? Do you feel the imbalance of the fact that we don't have that? It's the asymmetry in our relationship with death. And it should be part of our culture. And it's, I think, important to reinstantiate it. And recollecting our ancestors is key. There was a psychologist named Peter Fisher at the University of Berlin, and they did a study where they had participants recollect their ancestors, even annoying ancestors, for 5 minutes before taking a test. Those who didn't recollect ancestors, even if they recollected friends or others, scored an average of 10 out of 16 on this test. Those who'd recollected ancestors for about 5 minutes, even annoying ones, got 14 out of 16. It was a huge increase in performance. And I heard that study and thought it was one of those like interesting facts that's fun to listen here, but probably not true. And I looked it up, and they really did these studies, and that's pretty amazing. And I think just the sense of being held by our history, of not being this lone piece, fragment of reality without any history or holding. Recollect our ancestors. And if your explicit lineage of parents and grandparents doesn't resonate as deeply, know that the Buddha said that when you begin to practice, you begin to change your lineage. Those 4 noble lineages I talked about, of becoming a practitioner, of remembering that you're part of a thread through human history that has lasted for 2,500 years since the Buddha's time, of monks and nuns quietly practicing in forest monasteries and caves, of laymen and laywomen carrying on this teaching in quiet through famine and war and everything. This is your lineage. Your father is the Buddha. Your mother is Pajapati, Venerable Dhammadinna. Your father, Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Mahamoggallana, Ajahn Chah. This is the lineage you're stepping into as you practice. And what can you feel the brightness of heart that comes from that? Because in Buddhist thought with reincarnation, really we are just bouncing around left and right, different reincarnations, this country, that country. If you believe in such things, then that's really the only unifying thread, is this karmic practice. And once again, even if you don't believe in rebirth, we are amalgamations of pattern. And the warp and woof of cultural cloth from which we are made, the mimetic repetitions through generations, shifts depending on culture. But this one bright, archetypal, glowing thread of the path that the Buddha opened for us that has not closed, that pattern remains. That is what you are the inheritors of now. That is your lineage. So can you recollect those ancestors when you need to? And remember that you're not alone. In the midst of this society, of this changing world of politics, which I know are frightening and angering many, recollect that you are part of a thread that has outlasted war and empires rising and falling, and our duty as practitioners is not to think that things will never fade. I was talking to Ajahn Longpor Sumedho once about democracy in the US, and he said, sankharas rise and sankharas fall. And it's not like we don't want to do good and try to take action where necessary. I want to emphasize that. We can take action where necessary, and you'll know that path yourself. But to know that you're also touched into a much deeper storyline now that will remain no matter what happens on the surface. If you found refuge in the triple gem, you've hit the jackpot. Everything else is cherries on top. But if you found this lineage, you have your family. And you have an opportunity to, with this brief moment, give the greatest love you can to the world. And what a blessing. So I wish you all the best in doing so.
Handamayam Dhammakataya Sadhu Karam Daramase Sadhu 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 Anumodami.
So we have time for some Q&A or comments. If people want to speak up, just raise your hand, and we'll have Susan's our wonderful mic runner today. She'll run it over to you. And if you're on Zoom, you can raise your electronic hand, but I think we have one over here with Tim.
Thanks so much. Oh, is it on? Yeah. Thanks so much for that talk and meditation. And yeah, I like that phrase, life is uncertain and death is certain. And the Sankara, saying Sankara is broken, I guess I have a little difficulty with that. I know people sometimes will say life is unfair, and that's just how it is. But it's kind of a view. I kind of like, life is amazing in a way. It is unfair, but it's also amazing. Something I also wanted to ask, as I work as a physician, and occasionally I'll have patients who are dying. They say, "What do you believe? What do you believe is going to happen after death?" And I, so I know Buddhism believes, well, you can believe in reincarnation, and then you talked about there's a place that you go, and it's this kind of part, And as a scientist, we can't, well, that doesn't really make sense. And I think Buddhism also says, well, consciousness continues, and yet it depends on what, consciousness seems to be. There's also the finality of death. I mean, it's clearly a living organism does die, and it's irreversible, and it's over. So I would like to know, if somebody asks you what happens after death, what do you say? And but what I said, which actually I was okay with this, is that, we're energy, and the energy it's here now, and it continues afterwards. But that's just abstract, and so I'd like to hear what you would say.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I think it's important to bring, the sort of much more mainstream view to kind of bear so they can be in conversation, and I really appreciate you doing that too. And I also appreciate your refinement with the my phrasing of samsara, life is broken, because implicitly the conditioned realm isn't broken or unbroken, it's just a swirling mix of conditions. It's rather that we come with expectations of it, and I don't know anyone who has ever had all of their expectations met by it, and often they're disappointed quite profoundly. And our expectations keep getting higher depending on how high we go. It's the hedonic treadmill. And I suppose what I'm pointing to there is the Buddha's word was viraga, which is dispassion, and nibbida, which is disenchantment. And it's just a sense of not tying our heart to the conditioned realm being a certain way all the time. And it's not, Ajahn Nisabho says, it's not the monkey getting tired of the banana, it's us getting tired of being a monkey. And that's what I'm pointing to rather in that case, is just, this is we subconsciously constantly expect, no matter how much we try to instruct ourselves to not expect more from the world than it'll give, we just do, and we want security from it. And I think there's a real place for sobriety and wisdom in just being like, the conditioned realm is subject to so many variables, there's no way I can control it. And as long as my happiness is predicated on that, it's a delicate situation that probably won't end up winning. And in the end, death happens, which is, but simultaneously, yeah, life is extraordinary because it's a chance to cultivate love and a path and a happiness, well-being, and gift that's beyond that conditioned realm. And I think, I love life. I'm aiming for awakening, but I feel so blessed in this life. So I totally agree. And I think articulating that balance in a way your heart kind of feels is correct is usually an important balance of articulation to strike. So thank you for refining that. As to what happens after death, if someone asked me, I would say, I don't know. I don't. This is what my teachers and Buddhism kind of put forward. If there was an opportunity for that discussion, I might bring it up. And it is interesting, I think it can be worth, at some point in practice, reading a bit of the research of Dr. Ian Stevenson on past life memories of children that have been verified. And you can be like, oh, I remember when I didn't believe in any of these things, and I'd hear something like that, and it would just bounce right off in like fake science, without any investigation or curiosity. And then I really read some of the materials, and it was somewhat convincing to me. So that's my personal belief, but the Buddha had this beautiful sutta where it's called the Chanki Sutta, and he says one protects truth by saying, I have this belief, and that's that much, but one does not yet come to the conclusion only this is true. And then the Brahmin says, what's final arrival at truth? And the Buddha says, it's when you achieve awakening. And it's so beautiful that in the end, the one place the Buddha pinned, like this is what we can actually verify, is just the free heart. And, all this other stuff about rebirth or not, one can practice very well for a long time without that belief, I think. And I love how the Buddha gave room for that, because so many faiths, there's this binary of faith at the heart of it. Like, you either accept someone as your savior or you don't. Binary. And with Buddhism, it's like, start meditating, see how it goes. It's a working hypothesis. So yeah, and I think a lot of people, I think that idea of patterning is a really useful one, because that is, in the Buddhist conception, there is a little more going on, and the Buddha was careful not to get too deep into those waters, because it's hard, I think impossible to articulate completely. But I think the patterning is a really valid way of looking at it, like how much beauty do we want to bring in the world, How does all that land, Tim, at all?
Yeah, I think that the sense I got was that this one person was kind of was sort of anxious about passing, and was kind of wanting some, and so saying, I don't know, that's certainly the correct answer, but I kind of wanted to say something that might allow him to let go.
Yeah. I really understand that. One option is just asking a bit about their history and spiritual thing, and just letting them begin to articulate maybe what feels right for them. And that's, I honor your moving with care and delicacy through that landscape. That would not be an easy one to do, and really respect people's, not lay too much on them either. So, yeah.
We have Juan Philippe online.
Online, please. Juan, please. I think you're muted. Oh, never mind. You can talk.
Oh, yes, thank you. So my question is, how do we balance the teaching on not self and the 5 recollections? And I ask that because when you say, I am of the skin and so on, there's an I there. And at the same time, neither of the 5 skandhas are self, then what skins, what dies, and so on.
Oh, it's a good question, Juan. So with the 5 recollections, how do we balance the personal pronouns in there and the conception of I am of the nature with the concept of not self, anatta? So I think one thing is it's funny, you will encounter people who begin to practice and they'll start trying to speak without using the personal pronoun at all. We get emails like that at the monastery every now and again. So yeah, you don't have to do that. The Buddha used conventional language, and there is a place for using, if you get pulled over for a parking ticket, or the police pull you over, you can't just say, this is just 4 elements talking to 4 elements. I'm out of here. You have to we have to operate in the world, and it's okay to step into that. And Ajahn Chah would say, I pick things up, but I pick them up lightly, and I know when to put them down. And you'll see that with really amazing practitioners. There's an agility of mind, and they can just shift like this, depending on what's most appropriate. And my sense is most of us can't just rest in a place of anatta. The movement towards anatta is one of relinquishment, patinisaga, chaga. It means giving up, giving away. It's the opening of the hand. And until we're awakening, our palsied, clenching, inevitably grips to new things, even more and more subtle things. And so if you have the sense, well, for months now, I've just been really, completely not self, bro, just like this, it's almost certainly delusion. Anatta is an active, reiterative process of letting go, and that's how you know it's real, is if you're watching yourself get hung up on something and then watching it release. Patinisaga, relinquishment, relinquishment, relinquishment. That's anatta in action. And Ajahn Jeff makes a really beautiful distinction between anatta as no self, and the Buddha was careful not to speak about what nibbana meant. It's beyond the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion. Like, what that is beyond words. But Ajahn Jeff articulates anatta as not self strategy. You keep saying, this is not me, this is not me, this is not me. And when you've let go again and again, you come to what's beyond self and not self. Or you come to what's beyond words. So yeah, anatta should be an active process. And after that happens enough, my sense is you really begin to feel more and more a quiet voice. There's this beautiful phrase in the Bible. First there was the storm and God was not in the storm. Then there was the fire and God was not in the fire. And then there was a still small voice. That still small voice becomes more and more present in your life. And it's not God in the Buddhist conception, but that alignment with Dhamma begins to be really powerful and palpable. And for me, that, as you keep on relinquishing year after year, you begin to get a sense for that attunement to Dhamma. And not to reify it too much, you can become deluded in that too. But my sense is it's not all this losing, it's not all this exhausting battle of letting go, which is in itself a relaxation, but you also do come into contact with some other sense of attunement to Dhamma after some time. So, yeah, we imbue things with self, and that's what the 5 recollections are about, stepping back from. Do not become intoxicated with life, with youth, with sickness, with health. The Buddha said, I saw a sick person and my intoxication with health faded. I saw a corpse and my intoxication with life faded. We're just becoming sober. And then you'll find you're much more poised to feel that attunement with Dhamma. And what cultivates the wholesome states and delights in those, that's chanda. That's the enlightenment factors operating. Zeal, enthusiasm. That help, Juan?
Yes.
Okay, great. Christopher, this may be our last question.
Thank you so much for the meditation. That was awesome. My question is, when you were talking about letting go, just a minute ago, you were just talking about letting go. It seems so much that life is so much greater than anything that I could ever fathom. I mean, it's not anything that is. It's a form of essence or transcendence, and it seems like we're kind of getting in that area, in that realm, or at least for myself, I felt a sense of transcendence where my physical body is a weight. And I mean, not like as I weigh a lot, but just the idea of life that I have around me in the material plane feels so weighted. And it's not that's what life is. And so when I was meditating today, I felt like my arms were being outstretched like a tree, and my bones were being expanded. I don't want to go on, but my point in saying, though, or my question initially is, when we let go of the physical body or the materialism of the world that is made of material, how do we not emotionally in our minds and in our bodies, because our bodies and our minds are attached to outcomes of what we've been conditioned to believe that life is. And in essence, I believe that our spirits are much more. That's where the afterlife comes in play. So we're no longer attached to that physical manifested form. So how do we recondition ourselves? Or and the last thing I will say, that when the person that has died in my life is my mother, and a friend, dear friend, had said she loved my mother's painting. She wanted it. I said, but it's not for sale. But what I feel when someone does die is, my thought to say to them is, thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Yeah. I'd say that the Buddha said the path to the deathless is found within this fathom-long body. And it's a powerful anchor and tool, and it's useful as an anchor in daily life for maintaining mindfulness. When you're becoming angry, just power down into your feet, just ground yourself. It's powerful in meditation when you begin to cultivate kind of a sort of awareness of the body. But you're also right that as the mind refines, in meditation, for example, you might find that awareness begins to expand out, and the breath body or the energetic body becomes very prominent. The Buddha articulated it sometimes, the mind-made body, as like a sheath of a piece of grass drawn out of its sheath, sort of moist. And when you begin to become skilled at working with the breath, you'll really feel a nourishment and a brightness. And if you cultivate lots of loving kindness or something, often awareness will expand and the body will begin to feel a bit claustrophobic and almost hot and vibratory, like it's holding too much. And in moments like that, the Buddha often articulated 4 elements, the different sensations of the body: solidity, earth, liquidity, cohesion, fire, heat, air, movement. But sometimes he'd articulate 2 additional ones: consciousness and space. And if you find that your mind has become very luminous, bright, and expansive, often that's when to step in to just invoke awareness, light, space, and let your chitta, your awareness, just grow out beyond the body. Invite it to. And yes, like as you practice, a resonance with those more refined elements will become more prominent. And the most universal religious symbol in the world is the halo, the sense of lightness. And you can see it in people, like light. The Buddha said enlightenment, light arose. So yeah, you'll begin to see that more in your life, just this. And I've said this before, but like people often miss the light nimitta, which is this sign that comes with the breath, because they're looking for a ball of light. And in life, in practice, people will often look for one brilliant peak experience to point to say, I'm making progress. And what people miss is often the light nimitta is just the sense of the whole mental landscape brightening, and you almost miss it. And similarly with life, like you might just look back after 3 years and notice my whole life is brighter. It's lighter, it feels more playful. And yeah, you're attuned to something, a higher frequency. It's beautiful. And still gratitude for the body, and coming back into it, because this is what we got. So thanks, Christopher. But yeah, learning to invite the mind to be bright and wide, and invite people to be a little curious about what happens after death, not to be too sure. I lived with a teacher, Ajahn Nisabho, and one woman came up after the meal one day and said, look, my mother came in my dreams and she's shivering and her clothes are ragged. And she just passed away in Sri Lanka. And Ajahn Nisabho says, yeah, she's just passed, and this is her asking for goodness, for you to think of her. And afterwards I said, Ajahn, I've heard about this in the suttas, but I've never seen it in person. He said, this happens all the time. And since then I've seen it many times on alms round. People will come and be dreaming of their dead relatives too. And most of us, if we think through our lives, there's someone in our life who's had some visitation or something. It's interesting. But huge caveat, you can completely practice without this belief. It's not essential. And I think really looking at the Buddha's wisdom and just giving us this way of looking at these things also as patterns of goodness we carry on. So, love, Christopher. I think that's a beautiful thing to say to people. Thank you. And honestly, we're all dying. This is life is a near-death experience. So, saying thank you to everyone. Thank you all.